Hey, what is up, YouTube? This is Bootney Farnsworth, and this is episode 2 of Bootney's Fight Stories. If you haven't seen the first one, you might want to check that out. The second story takes us to Russia. What?
It's in Russia. Are you nuts?
Yeah, you heard that right, Russia. So at the time, I was exclusively fighting for Hook and Shoot. Hook and Shoot was a small MMA show out of Indiana. And in 2002, around this time frame, the only MMA shows were, of course, the big show. You had the UFC, then you had shows in California, and you had shows in Iowa. Extreme Cage Combat with Pat Miletich and those guys, Jens Pulver, Robbie Lawler, guys like that. So the promoter Hook and Shoot asked if I would fight Andrei Semenov, and I was a little bit hesitant because Semenov had well over 20 fights at the time. But I thought it was a good opportunity, seeing as I just came off a huge loss to an opponent that I should have decimated. Accompanying me on this trip was one of the promoters and 2 UFC vets, Dave Strasser and Big Ben Rothwell. And I make sure before I get over there that I watch Rocky IV a couple of 100 times for some motivation. You know, this was the US against Russia. Well, the flight was cool. I didn't really know what to expect other than what I seen on the movies. Having been in the Navy, I had traveled many places, but I had never been to this part of the world. So we land St. Petersburg Airport, real small airport, and I can remember the environment. The environment was dark and gloomy. I mean, it was in November, it was cold as heck, but it was more about just the overall environment. And I mean, I understand why Russia produces some of the toughest fighters. Our escorts take us to the hotel where we're staying, and outside the hotel they have a billboard, and the billboard has my picture on there, Semenov, and a couple other fighters, Dave Strasser, Big Ben Rothwell. Well, our rooms were decent, they weren't too fancy, so we're putting all our stuff up, talking about the upcoming fights. And the promoter that came with us, the Hook and Shoot promoter, he tells us that the guys putting on this show had ties to the Russian mafia. So I mean, we really didn't care. We actually thought it was kind of cool. So the promoters tell us not to go too far from the hotel because there's a little shopping center, and that's pretty much all we did. A couple days before the fight, we just did a little shopping, eating, things like that. So the day before the fight, we do our weigh-ins, you know, typical weigh-ins, typical face-off. Everything went smooth. The show promoters were real respectful to us, but I still had in the back of my mind, you know, are these dudes the Russian mafia? But anyway, so it's fight day. The fight takes place in an old hockey stadium. It's pretty big. Can't remember how many people were there. I come out to fight, and the crowd is hostile. I mean, like Rocky IV hostile. But unlike Rocky IV, Russians don't boo, but they whistle. Yeah, so psychologically it was all good for me, because, you know, it's one thing coming out there and hearing a bunch of boos, but all this whistling, I was like, oh, okay, I think they love me. The bell rings, and I'm ready to go. I throw a good hard kick to Semenov's leg, push him back against the cage, and I slam him on top of his head. But I slam him so hard that when we hit the ground, I ended up in a bad position. I got mounted. I turned my back. Something you never do when you're mounted is give your opponent your back, and he sunk in a rear naked choke. Shit. Well, after the fight, I wasn't too bummed. I mean, it was a great opportunity for me, but unfortunately, I didn't get the win. So after the fights, we decided to we ended up going to 2 different bars. Now, the first bar we went to was walking distance from our hotel. And it was a regular bar, but the difference is the waitresses were dressed like they were strippers. So we're all sitting there drinking, you know, having a good time. And one of the waitresses, she gets up, and Dave Strasser, one of the fighters, noticed that she has a string hanging out of her crotch area. You know, it was like a kitten playing with a piece with some yarn or something. And the poor girl was trying to look sexy, and she had no idea that she had a string hanging out of her. So we end up going to another bar. We go by cab. Now, this is a bar that one of the promoters of the show advised us to go to. So we get there, and I noticed to my left that one of the Russian promoters was sitting in the corner, and he hadn't seen us yet. So we walk in, and this drunk crazy guy walks up to us and starts harassing us. And he starts speaking in Russian, and I don't speak Russian, but I'm pretty sure he was cussing us out. So it starts getting heated. You know, the guy starts yelling at us, and then the promoter that's sitting in the corner looks over to the guy that's yelling at us, and I'll never forget this look. But he didn't say anything. He looked at the guy and smiled and shook his head. It was some cold shit, because after the guy shook his head, the guy harassing us totally sobered up, totally changed, and he even bought us a drink. And I don't speak Russian, but I can guarantee you that I just witnessed some cool mafia shit. Well, this concludes episode 2 of Bootney Farnsworth Fight Stories. Stay tuned, because in episode 3, we're going to discuss kidnapping, forensic files, and a quote by Maya Angelou. When people show you who they are, believe them. This is Bootney Farnsworth, the only pugilistic COD commentator in the business.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe.